Let's look at the state of the world economy through the eyes of a world-renowned business leader, next on Behind the Headlines.
This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to another edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and my co-host, Maura Donnelly, is on vacation. We're waiting anxiously for her return, and we miss you, Maura. I'll come back soon. Nonetheless, we will have a very full show today and a very exciting one because we have a very special guest. A special guest for special times. These are critical times for the world economy. We hear discussions all the time at this point about bankruptcies, about foreclosures, about balance of payments and globalization, but yet many of us struggle to understand that. Well, there is one person in Pennsylvania, certainly one of the top people in the United States and the world who understands all these issues, and that is Mr. Derek Hathaway, Dr. Derek Hathaway, who is the retired CEO and chairman of Harsco Corporation, of course located in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, which has operations in more than 50 countries around the world and with more than 22,000 employees. If there's someone in Pennsylvania who understands the international economy, it's Derek Hathaway. Derek, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I wondered if we could start at the beginning, Derek. 2 years ago, if you were to try to summarize to the general public what happened to the world economy, which led to many of these national and state economic issues that we are facing today, these challenges, what happened? If you could, if it's possible to summarize it for the average viewer.
When this thing really broke, I had the privilege of speaking at Elizabethtown College to a group of people there, and in a question and answer session, I was asked the same question: what has happened? And I answered that as honestly as I could at the time, and I said that to me it was such an extraordinary and complex issue that I was not capable of, neither was I equipped at that time with sufficient information to make a judgment. There is a sense in which all of the evidence is still coming in. As you know, there are inquiries and investigations in our own Congress and in the parliaments around the world. There is a lot of finger pointing as to who is guilty and who's not. People are being attacked and they're defending themselves by attacking those that are attacking them. So at the moment we have really, I think, a lot of smoke still on the battlefield, and it's not clear. The conclusion really that I am coming to is that we all participated in the particular debacle that we're experiencing. By all, I mean government, the financial institutions, the consumer. And what actually happened was that the traditional forms of financing that we really understand, which is that I save, I lend the money to the bank, and then the bank lends the money, over the past, let's say, 20 years or so, has developed into a far more sophisticated form of financing. And so banks and investment banks, anxious to find alternative products away from the traditional borrowing and lending ideals of banks, got involved in all kinds of financial instruments which tended to be so complex. And also they sold and resold and resold. These were in fact also, as we're beginning to understand, given AAA credit ratings by the rating agencies.
Well, I guess this is you're going ahead to the subprime mortgage
Yes,
crisis.
yes.
So you believe that did indeed play a role, at least here in America, in this financial situation?
Well, it did, because it played such an incredible role here with the selling and reselling and reselling and reselling, that what happened was that many banks are international by nature. They interchange funds on an overnight basis to each other. Mm-hmm. And what actually happened was that the banks just, when the roof fell in, and they were in negative equity positions and people could not repay their mortgages, then we had the Countrywide and other experiences where the financial institutions just went broke. They were left holding the prize and there were no chairs to sit on. And you cannot lend money as a banker to people that cannot afford the repayments. To me, that's the very essence of it. And as a banker for a short space of time, for a number of years with a leading US bank, I learned that banks were mandated by government to lend to people who couldn't afford it in order to increase home ownership, in the belief that prices of houses were going to rise. Well, of course, what actually happened was that because of the crisis, people were left without homes and are still, even today, having that problem. Foreclosures are still going on. Banks are still trying to recover their money. And it is a very, very serious situation, which at the moment they're still trying to clean up. And it isn't over.
And there was actual legislation that was adopted during the during the Carter administration to mandate that those banks make those types of loans, and then that was given some type of enforcement teeth, I guess, yes, during the Clinton administration.
Right.
And we've gone from there.
And the profligacy has been actually directed at the banks because of their poor lending record, when in fact it was mandated by government. Mm-hmm. And secondly, the government were the biggest practices of that through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Mm-hmm. And yet today they're holding inquiries. The real inquiry ought to start at the beginning. And it's not a bad place to start. Where did the axe head fall? And if you look directly down, that's probably where you'll find it, and start from there.
And the people who were in charge of some of the inquiries, at least in Congress, were people who were intimately involved with those agencies.
And the major protagonists.
Yes. Well, we're talking about debt, and certainly there's a concern about increasing indebtedness in the United States, increasing indebtedness among many nations of the world, of course. We hear some talks of the American debt being 12 or 13, 14 trillion dollars, but then when you look at future obligations, we hear as much as 122 to 124 trillion dollars that the nation is in debt. What role does debt play in this world financial crisis? How did you manage debt as a chairman of and CEO of a major worldwide corporation? How should government handle it, Derek?
Well, you've asked two questions there in one. Okay, two questions there. What role does it play? Well, debt, providing it's not abused, is a very important part of a company's operations. There are two terms which we used to focus on very, very thoroughly at Harsco, and a commitment that I made to my board when I first got that job 17 or 18 years ago, which was that I will always keep the debt to equity ratio, in other words, the balance sheet, in gear and as strong as I possibly could.